Hello again. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my first experience. I should start at the beginning, really, shouldn't I? So I'm going to talk about my first UFO sighting and how I've written it in the book, the first book. The beginning of the book, I go through what the CE 1 to 3 is, Close Encounters, 1 to 7, but I'm not going to go through all of that because most people know what they are nowadays. And I'm just going to start with my story. You can always get the book, or you can look them up on Wikipedia, etc., what the CEs are. Alan Hynek was the one that made up the close encounter levels, and this was used to good effect in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind by Steven Spielberg, where Hynek had a cameo role in it, interestingly enough. But anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about my first experience, first seeing of UFO, and how I wrote down and how I remembered it. So I'm going to read from my book, so I'm going to use my glasses and see how we go. Okay, so after I've laid out the premise of the close encounters, the levels, I said, with that said, we move forward to the year 1977. I was 12 years old and lived in the countryside. A friend had asked me to do his early morning paper round for him whilst he was on holiday for a week. You had to be 13 years old to do an early morning paper round, but as there was no one else to do it in the quiet village, the distributors allowed me to do it. You had to be 13 at the time. This is the 1970s. I was 12, so I was a year too young, but he asked me to do it. I didn't really know this guy that well, actually, strangely enough, but I used to see him coming on and off the bus. He was a year above me at school. And he said he's going on holiday. I think it was for 2 weeks, actually. And he said, would you like to do my paper round? I don't know who else to ask. And I went, oh yeah, I could do that for a bit of money. I thought, yeah, why not? Make some cash. So I took it on. All these things are, I don't believe in coincidence. I think if you think something's a coincidence, it's simply that you don't understand the root cause of it and all the connections to it. It's just an ignorance of all of the facts, mostly with coincidences anyway. That's what I believe through my experience in my life. You may have another opinion, but that's mine. Anyway, so yeah, I agreed to this paper round, and on one of these mornings I was cycling down Bales Lane. This is the lane I lived on, actually. A dead-end road with common land at the end, which went for miles towards the nearest town of Guildford, and had a couple of farms which were accessible by tracks from the end of the lane onto the common land. As I was cycling past the fields on the way to the end, I felt something on my shoulder. I turned to look, and there, looking straight at me, was a bird of prey no less. It looked like a buzzard. I had the feeling that it was saying hello to me. I said hello back in my mind, and it then took off and flew away. That was a very strange occurrence. It left me with a kind of nice feeling, actually, but not quite as strange or as nice as what I was about to experience. So I turned the corner and was pedalling up a slight incline towards the end of the lane, when ahead and to the right, under the dark, heavily laden cloud, was a bright light. It was elliptical in shape and had very defined edges, despite the light emanating from it being extremely bright, brighter than any normal light. And this I've put in brackets, close encounters of the first kind, because it was within a certain distance. Well, I could see it, and it was a distance away from me. It was completely silent and moving in a slow southeasterly direction towards Guildford. The idea of space and its inhabitants was of interest to me. I watched Doctor Who and UFO and Space 99 with glee and excitement. I would imagine a spaceship coming down and the jolly spaceman inviting me aboard to see the ship and maybe even take me for a trip abroad, or aboard, I should say. I always get that word muddled up. But on seeing this ship of light in front of me, I stopped pedalling and became motionless. In fact, I found that I was extremely scared and I was now unable to move any of my limbs. And in brackets I put close encounter of the second kind, human paralysis or catalepsy. I wanted to turn around and cycle home as fast as possible to get away, but I was frozen, like a rabbit caught in the headlights of a car. The ship slowly passed across in front of me, silently. It was perhaps 50 to 100 foot across. I can't be sure, as I couldn't judge the distance too well. Maybe it was bigger. My head and eyes moved with the craft as it went across the horizon. It was involuntary movement, as the only thing I really wanted to do was move my legs in furious pedalling back in the other direction. All the time, as I could see the craft, in my head, I was saying a mantra. Don't come near me, don't come near me, don't come near me. Go away, go away, go away. Over and over again, I would be saying this in my head as the ship passed silently in front of me. Now it was off to the left, and there were some few breaks in the clouds, and the craft went in behind a cloud. It came out, went behind another cloud, came out, and it went behind a third cloud. This time, it didn't come back out. I couldn't see it anymore. So after a few seconds, when I was sure that it had gone and didn't return, I suddenly found full use of my limbs. They all became restored, and I was able to cycle back home in a rush. Back home, I rushed into the house and told my mother what I'd seen. But actually what I didn't mention there was, I think I ran straight inside and hid underneath the dining room table in the dining room. Why would I do that? I don't know. That was my reaction, to hide underneath something. Very strange. But quite traumatizing. One of my sisters was there and heard everything, but didn't believe a word. She said to my mother, "Oh, he just doesn't want to do the paper round. He's trying to get out of doing it." Which actually, is a fair assumption. Why the hell would you believe that I saw a UFO? It seems incredulous. I mean, I was only 12. My sister was only a couple of years older than me. Nothing could be further from the truth, however. Put my teeth in. I was too frightened to go back out again, and my mother helped with the paper round that day. So now I learned to keep quiet, not to mention things of that nature to anyone, as people didn't believe. But I was shown something extraordinary that day, that the world was a place where things were possible. Things that even science and education say don't exist. But there it was, plain as day, flying through the sky. So what else is possible? What else really exists? In UFO lore sometimes people have screen memories, either implanted or their minds create a false memory to cover what they actually saw, as a reality is too much for the conscious mind to cope with. It seems popular for people to have dreamt about or remember seeing an owl, when in fact it was an alien visitation. In this case, I saw a bird of prey that landed on my shoulder. A very unlikely scenario in reality. It was in fact more likely to be a cover memory for something far more interesting, which is a close encounter of the third and fourth kind, which is a close-up with ETs, aliens, and seeing them close at hand. I think I prefer to call them ETs and aliens. I use the word alien because everyone recognises it, but I think ET is a slightly better, kinder word. I'm not saying they're all kind, but in my opinion, that's the best way to come across it, to approach this subject of people that live from other places. My interest in UFOs was now cemented, and I fervently looked for all explanations for the existence of UFOs. Not because I thought they were great and fascinating, but because I wanted to disprove my experience. That I could put the thought in my head that they weren't real, and what I saw was a phenomenon of nature, perhaps some rare but real phenomena that was not visiting advanced cultures from another place, because I couldn't sleep well at night anymore, not knowing what was out there in the night. But after a long search, I found I could not disprove the experience. There was lots of good reasons put forward by intelligent people why they couldn't be here, but the reality of experience showed them to be wrong. There was no easy sleeping in bed at night after all. So that's what I put there in the book. It's, a couple of things. It's true, it scared me to death. I recognise now that had PTSD after that. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not sure that was even a recognised disorder at the time in 1977. Yeah, it might have been, I don't know. But because no one would believe you, and I had no one to tell, I don't even know if I told my closest friends at the time. It was just so traumatising. So that's a lot of trauma, and you can't tell anyone, and no one believes you. So you're kind of cornered, stuck in a bad place, I think. So it probably affected a lot of my behaviour, etc. at the time, and mental state. I think overall I coped pretty well with it. But yeah, so I was investigating what it could have been if it wasn't a UFO. Although all my senses were telling me it was a UFO. It was a really heavily laden, dark clouds. The sky was covered, like in the UK, we get just complete cloud cover. It was like that, it was complete cloud cover, and they were quite dark clouds. So they were a bit low in the sky, I think, because they were like almost rainy looking. And this thing just came from the right-hand side of my vision across the horizon, above the trees, and just went, and then it went in and out. There were some breaks in the clouds off towards Guildford, which was off to my left-hand side, and it went in and out a couple of times and then disappeared, thankfully. Well, thankfully. And I was able to move again. I forgot where I was going with it now. But anyway, yeah, so very traumatised. So I wanted to disprove. So the only thing I found that vaguely resembled as a picture in a book that was a phenomenon of nature was that if the sun is at a certain angle and there's a pool of water like a big pond or something, or whatever, a lake, then the sun reflecting on the surface of the water could reflect back up into the clouds and give this elliptical look of light. I held on to that as a reason for what it was, and that's what it was for me, because that enabled me to not think about it. I knew it was a lie because I knew that if it was the sun, so there was no sun, it was complete cloud cover. So that wipes that out in the first place. And the second thing is, if it was the sun and the cloud movements, that's what they said in this particular article. I don't think you ever find it again because it's ridiculous. I think it's more rare to see that sun reflecting from a pool of water on the clouds than it is to see a UFO. But yes, they said, and then the movement of the cloud cover. It was at the time when UFOs were really debunked. The movement of the cloud cover with the reflection makes it look like the reflection is moving. But of course, as I said, it appeared on the right hand side, and the only thing that moved was my eyes and my head as I watched it, as it went across the horizon. So if it was the sun, the sun doesn't move that quick. So it wouldn't be the sun. So, and I knew that at the time when I saw this description, but I chose to lie to myself and hold on to that as a reality of what it was, so that I could didn't have to think about it too much. I could bury it basically to the bottom of my consciousness and my mind, which is exactly what I did. You have to find a way to carry on, don't you? So that's one thing. It's a weird explanation, isn't it? But it's the only thing. There was a picture in a book. I don't even know what a magazine or book I found. Probably a debunking book about UFOs or something. I mean, forget the internet. The internet wasn't there in 1977, or not for the general population. I don't think it really was to the 90s. I remember college in the 80s, there was computers, but was there an internet? There wasn't even when did mobile phones start? Oh, in the 80s, first mobile phones were like a big brick, weren't they, like this, and you had to carry around a battery pack, which was like a suitcase to go with the phone. Absolutely ridiculous, but really funny. And you see, so funny. I've gone off on a tangent now, but seeing people with the phones, people were laughing about these other people. You see pictures in the newspapers or whatever, or on TV, where someone would have one of these phones because it was the height of technology at the time. So, and someone would have it, and they'd be outside their house with their phone talking outside so that everyone who's passing can see them, that they've got one of these phones, and they don't have to walk around with this big battery case. It just looked ridiculous. And the fact that someone would do that, it also is pretty sad. Anyway, so yeah, that's that. Yeah, pretty traumatizing. So what do I do with that? Bury it. That's what I did. It wasn't until my late 20s, in fact, that I really started to look at all these things again, because I had many other experiences after. I think that cracked my consciousness open and my mind. I bet I dare to say that I had some open psychic abilities maybe beforehand, but I think that cracked my consciousness open, and then the stuff started flooding in. The other thing I want to say about that is I said about the bird of prey, and I'm sure I told a few people about that because I thought that was really amazing. A bird of prey flew down and landed on my shoulder. I mean, I was only 12, right? I was only small. A bird of prey would have tore my coat to bits or my shoulder or whatever. And there's no way. And quite rightly, a couple of people must have said, I think, someone must have owned the bird. It must have been a tame one. Why would it ever land on your shoulder? And that's quite true. Why would it? But later on, many years later, spoiler alert for the second book. I mean, I wrote that book in 2011. So interestingly, I wrote that book and I put that down. But did I mention it later? Because later, before 2011, before I wrote the book, I went to a monastery and was a Buddhist monk for a while. Spent a few years in a monastery overall, and whilst I was there, and all the meditation and stuff, cleaning my mind out, I had a memory recall about that incident, and I recalled. It was like I was asleep, so it was a dream memory recall. You could say it was a dream, but it wasn't. It was a memory recall. It was quite vivid, and it had a lot of emotion and stuff with it. It was, and what happened was, before I saw the UFO, I was cycling up the lane, and there were some fields to the left and right. But in a field to the right, there was a UFO that was landed. The UFO had landed in the field. So I'd say it wasn't 100 foot across, it's probably more like 50. But, I'm sure it's quite a big field actually. But it's probably more like 50 foot. 30 to 50 foot, I would say. The occupants were outside the craft, and they were very human looking. But that is my memory, of course. And my memory has been messed with, because when I saw the bird of prey, it was a metaphor, if you like, a cover memory and a metaphor for meeting the occupants of the craft. And the fact that it flew down, that animal shot flew away, I think because I went over this gate to meet, there was this woman coming towards me. She had a blonde hair, like a bob, what we call a bob, and she was a lovely looking woman in what I recall as a blue skin tight sort of overall suit, one piece suit. And she was smiling, beaming, a big beaming smile away, beaming at me. She was just really happy to see me. And she was coming towards me, and she had her arms, I can't do it, my arms go out the camera, but she had her arms outstretched with her hands like this. And she was like she was coming to give me a big hug or pick me up or whatever. And the feelings I had there it was unbelievable. The feeling of love and connection and belonging. It's really hard to describe. It's not a feeling I've ever had in the rest of my life as a human here. It's beyond that. It's much deeper feeling of love and connection and oneness and belonging, and all of these things all together were rolled up into this one sort of feeling that's just words trying to describe the feeling. So I just felt wonderful, and this is what she was exuding in a very psychic way, because they're very psychic. the, ETs in my experience, and a lot of other people's experience that I've read about. So that was an amazing experience. And I went over into the field, and the memory's short, and she was coming towards me, and the only thing I really remember was her hand. I looked at her hand because she had a hand. She was coming to pick me up, and her hand had 6 fingers. It was like a normal hand, but there was like just an extra digit, so it was like six fingers. But it didn't look too wide for a hand. It looked kind of normal. It's weird, but it had 6 fingers. Now the question is, of course, did it have 6 fingers? I was telling this to someone when I was at the monastery, a friend of mine, a spiritual person and everything, and he was quite wisely said, "Oh, was it 6 fingers, or was it a representation of a 6th sense? Like she knew you psychically. She knew you on a whole nother level in a 6th sense sort of way. And that's why the 6 fingers." I think that could well be. As a story and my understanding and my experience, it's all been slowly revealed to me in my life as I've gone along. that very well was probably the case, but I don't know. But I think that could well be the case. As it turns out, I do know this lady. I think I know who she is. That's coming along in the future as we get there. But I didn't see the craft, but I knew it was there. There was just a complete knowing. I knew it was there. And also was a knowing was there was 2 guys there as well, hanging back near the craft. Again, I don't recall seeing them, but I just know they were there. So there's quite a few elements to this. And I do believe I went on the craft. Now, also, what I didn't mention in the book, there's a few things I didn't mention in the book which I could have done, and I don't know why, really, at the time. At the time, when I wrote the book, I wanted to write down facts as I really knew them. And although I had this memory, this recall of a memory, I was nervous about putting that down. I mean, the book isn't full of all of my experiences and stuff. It's just enough that makes the story go along and try to hopefully make some sense. There's lots of things and snippets of stuff that I might have remembered and dreams of being someone else somewhere else and stuff that are just not quite, I can't tie them into everything else to make it like a flow. And at the time, I thought that was too crazy. It was too out there. And this is only 13 years ago now this year. It doesn't seem too long. It doesn't feel too long ago to me, but so I just wasn't confident in putting it in. So I don't think I went back in that later in the book. I think I might have added a section actually. I think because this is a rewrite. The original book has a different cover, and this was a reprint. I've redone it so that the 2 books can be found together. Because the account I used to make the first book originally, I can't seem to access it. I couldn't connect it with my new book, which is multiversal like that. So I think I did later on in this book, actually, saying that I didn't. I think later in the book, I added in that I met them. I think I did. Looking through. Anyway, we'll get there. So these are some of the elements around it. So it's a memory recall, and the feeling of love and connection was just beyond anything earthly, you could say. But I think that these people, these beings, they are not just advanced technologically, but there's a spiritual advancement. They kind of live in a kind of higher frequency level of being. And I think that as you go up with the higher frequency, all these feelings and emotions and stuff, and is all heightened. There's a higher vibrational level, so it's all experienced in a different way. And I only experienced that because she was exuding it, and I was able to receive it. Maybe not everyone will be able to receive it, but I have read other stories of other people who've had a similar lovely experience with meeting aliens. You can, and some people get that from the craft sometimes. Anyway, for me, it was this particular being, this particular person whom I had that experience with. That was before I saw the UFO. Now, my memory was blocked. Why was my memory blocked? Did I repress the memory? I don't think so, because that was an absolutely amazing, wonderful experience. Because then I went up the road afterwards. Oh, that's the other thing. Oh, again, I don't think I put it in this book. I might have put it in that clip later. When I got home, I said, I saw a UFO, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, well, have you done the paper round? I said, no, I've only just started. That was the first couple of places I was going to. And they said, well, you've been gone long enough to do it. So, which would have taken me, what, an hour or something, 45 minutes or an hour. It wasn't a massively long paper round. 45 minutes. So I just gone out and come straight back, I thought. But they thought I'd taken 45 minutes. So I'd say there was definitely missing time. And that's why, part of why I think, oh, I went on the craft, but also many years later in 2018, I was lucky enough to have a regression with Mary Rodwell. And I wanted to go back to that time. And in the regression, I did have some recall, managed to flesh out a bit more information. But I'll get to that in another video. So yes, so that is the start of the story, the start of my story, and some of the things around it. So I think that'll do you for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Yeah, please subscribe and share this around with your friends and people who might be interested. And feel free to comment if you've had any experiences yourself, etc. It's always nice to hear these things. And see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.